Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter New York Giants football podcast. I'm Dan Schneier, joined as always my co-host Nick Filato. And there's a lot to talk about today, actually. Joe Schoen just had his combine presser, and we know Joe Schoen to normally give us nothing when it comes to these combine pressers, but there were a few hints and there were a few interesting things that Schoen got into. A follow-up question from Charlotte Carroll, who works for The Athletic, was a really good one that got Schoen to divulge a little bit about a specific draft prospect in this class, a quarterback prospect in this class. So we're going to get to that. We're going to get to some of the other things he said. And I want to talk a little bit, Nick, with you about what Titans GM Mike, and I don't know how to pronounce this Paisan's name. This Paisan, Mike Borgonzi, was that his name? Mike Borgonzi?
I don't know. Is he a Paisan, though?
Bro, Borgonzi. The I at the end of it, Borgonzi.
I mean, it has an I at the end of it, but it could be one of those sneaky Eastern European last names.
It could be a Polak for sure.
Hello, you just dropped that one in there.
Could be a Polak, but it feels like an Italiano, Michael. But we'll get into some stuff he said, because he said some interesting things with regards to trading up and trading down in this draft class. The Titans hold the number 1 overall pick. Joe Schoen also mentioned some things about that. So it all kind of ties in together, Nick. The first thing I do want to say, though, is I tweeted this out because I found it very interesting and maybe where we can start to talk about. Joe Schoen said, and I quote, that I'm for taking swings at the quarterback position.
What kind of swings is he talking about?
Position. I'm sorry?
So what kind of swings is this guy talking about?
Well, yes, it's the most important position, and it's hard to find them. So keep on swinging. Keyword, keep on swinging. And then Warren Sharp pointed out, Schoen has gone 24 draft picks in 3 free agent cycles without taking a single swing on a quarterback. So how can you keep swinging when you never swung before? The Giants haven't drafted anyone around 2 or 3 to potentially develop into a franchise quarterback, or at the very least a good QB2. And famously last offseason, despite, Daniel Jones coming off really horrific tape in 2023. I know the O-line was bad in 2023, but even in the moments it wasn't bad. He was just horrific on tape. They didn't bring in any competition. They didn't, famously give Russell Wilson the opportunity to win that job, sign a Justin Fields or trade for a Justin Fields, really any option. I mean, Drew Lock, if you want to consider that, was the competition. So it's a very interesting quote to say that. I think maybe you could look at it 2 ways, Nick, but what way are you looking at it?
I'm looking at it as like, I know I really dropped the ball on this whole quarterback thing. So let me just throw this out. Yeah, I'm aware the quarterback position is great. We're taking swings. We took a swing on Daniel Jones. We gave him that contract. Didn't work out. But no, you have not taken any swings, Joe Schoen. All Giants Nation knows this at this point. And that quote is now circulating, I'm sure. It just happened like 30 minutes ago, but I'm sure by the end of this podcast, it's going to be circulating all around Twitter and people are going to be having a laugh at it. But it's one of those more depressive laughs because it's untrue. At this point, though, I can see Schoen out there just trying to make up for it. He's just trying to make up for the fact that he hasn't swung yet. And hopefully he hits something at this point.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there were a lot of actually interesting quotes in this. I'm going to kind of rapid fire you through these, Nick. The one that really stood out to me next was Joe Schoen mentioning, and this is a quote exactly. Trying to find this in the notes. Yes, we are looking for the best quarterback we can find who can help us win games in 2025. Very interesting quote. He didn't say who can help us win games. He didn't say who can help build around the future. Just help us win games now.
Logic would lead us in this direction. Everyone knows Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll's seat is very hot. And who's the name that they're looking at? It's the name that we've been talking about for the last month now. It's Matthew Stafford. And whenever Joe Schoen was asked about Matthew Stafford, he did not want to talk about it. He's just like, hey, yeah, ask the Rams, talk to the Rams anyways. Like, what's next? He doesn't want to engage in those conversations. But what other quarterback really fits this bill other than Matthew Stafford and possibly Aaron Rodgers? But that one I don't really see nearly as much.
Yeah, it's interesting because we have been told, Nick, that Joe Schoen has no plans to deviate from his plan. And what he's even said in his words were, I'm not going to mortgage the Giants' future for the success of the now. And that's something that he said I would feel uncomfortable doing. And he would feel like he would be doing John Mara and the organization a disservice. This kind of throws cold water in the face of that, in my mind, at least. Now, it's a quote. I won't make too much of it. I feel like they have a plan and they're not just like going to give it away. But I do feel like there's pressure on them to win now. It's obvious. And I do feel like that could impact their plan.
Dude, they escaped being unemployed by the skin of their teeth, man, by such a small thread. John Mara was on the precipice of saying, delete, you two are gone. And he was benevolent. He was just like,
I'll be magnanimous. I like what I heard from them on Friday afternoon, but my patience is wearing thin.
And this is going to be a short leash. If the Giants go out there and win 3, 4, they even win 6 games, these guys might be out of a job. So there is a lot of desperation here. Yes. I also don't want to necessarily conflate the desperation with the Matthew Stafford situation in general with it being reckless, because I don't necessarily think it's a reckless move. I think it's reckless the position the Giants are in, and that falls in the lap of Joe Schoen. But now we have to move forward and find a way out of that. And I do believe Matt Stafford is a way out of that, but it's not necessarily a long-term solution to this problem, to this mire that Joe Schoen has got us in, and Dave Gettleman has got us in, and Jerry Reese has got us in over the last 15 years, because these teams have not been able to draft and retain talent through the last 3 general managers at this point. Now, There were some hits by each of those general managers. And it's on Joe Schoen now, because this is Joe Schoen's roster, and this roster, specifically the quarterback position right now, is the reason why this team is unwatchable. And he's in there he's talking about swinging. It's comical to some degree.
It is, but this is why you and I are, I guess, not everyone's on our side with regards to the Matthew Stafford situation, but I think this is why we're on that side, because he even mentioned at some point in this presser, like, look, ideally you would want to draft a rookie quarterback, and play out his rookie contract with 5 years. But I've lived in the reality that is being a Giants fan for long enough now, because this used to be my stance as well. Back in the day, Nick, 4 or 5 years ago, I wasn't even covering this team, or I was for 24/7. We didn't have the podcast, but I would have never entertained a Matthew Stafford trade for all the reasons you've read and heard about from the fans who are against it. But I've lived in this reality for long enough to know that ideal world of finding that QB, drafting him, he's good, and you have him for the 5-year rookie deal is not common. It's not even something that I can bank on to any degree. And I've also lived in a reality of watching a horrific quarterback, what I deem to be very bad quarterback play, take down a franchise, take down the receivers, take down the hints of, is this guy developing at the receiver position or no? And just the whole locker room feel. Do you feel like you can win or not? Do you feel like you can rally around that guy like Washington and this group of players they have? I know they made some changes in the offseason, the Commanders, but how many changes did they really make to make that team as much better as they became? It wasn't as many as you think. Jaden Daniels came to that team, and they rallied around him. They believed they could win with him. And that's what Stafford would bring to the Giants, a belief that they can win. He would change the whole feeling. You want to change culture? I'll tell you one way to change culture, and it's not beat the Colts in week 16. It's bring in a quarterback who players believe they can win with any game, any day, any time. And that's what Stafford would bring them, even if it's short-lived, even if he's hurt, even if he's old, for the times that he's on the field. With what we've seen on tape from him in the last 2 years, and we've watched that tape now, you and I, enough of that tape to get a feel for it, we believe they would feel like they could win. It's a big reason why. It's not about trying to win in 2025 like Joe Schoen says for me and you. It's about changing the culture. And the only way that I believe you can change the culture is that if the players believe they can win every game.
Yes, and if this move does not cripple the Giants long-term from a financial standpoint, which it shouldn't, right, then why not pursue it? Because what's the other way out of this mess if we're going forward with Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll? And they do have that element of, hey, we do need to win games in 2025 to retain our jobs, which I'm not necessarily against that. I want to be competitive too. I don't want to waste the careers of Andrew Thomas and Dexter Lawrence and Malik Neighbors on his rookie contract, and some of these other players like Micah McFadden and Wan'Dale Robinson who aren't going to be here all that long. Like I would like to be competitive. If there was a Drake May or Jane, if there was these quarterbacks that we were certain about and we had conviction on, then yes, obviously we go for them at 3, and then we have that long-term solution. But I don't necessarily have that conviction right now on Ward or Shedeur based on the little film I watch. I always want to preface that, but I don't have that yet. So what is the other option other than let's bring in Jameis and maybe Russell Wilson? I like the Justin Fields thing. I'm willing to get Justin Fields and Matt Stafford and see if you can find something out of this. But what's the other option other than let's basically punt 2025 and then just get rid of the general manager and the head coach, which no one's going to sign off on that, obviously. So let's live in reality for a second and evaluate what is our best recourse moving forward to make this team competitive and to try to maximize the talent that this roster does possess. And for Joe Schoen, I imagine it is going after Matthew Stafford if it's not going to cost that 34, if you could still have basically 2 first-round picks with that 34th pick, and if you're just punting a third and a third conditional too, like we talked about on yesterday's episode. So That's why we're there. And it seems like, I mean, I have to imagine that's where Joe Schoen is, even though he did not want to talk about it, which I respect. Don't divulge and show your hand. Keep all this stuff tight to the vest when it comes to the Matthew Stafford situation, because I think the Pittsburgh Steelers are a team that are going to be in this running and really want to try to get this guy.
And I'll say that to your point, Nick, I would believe that based on his comments today, Joe Schoen, about we're trying to win in 2025 to the best we can, bring the quarterback who win in 2025. It may ultimately end up being a lot more trade compensation than what you're suggesting right now, especially if the Steelers get involved. And that's when it becomes a situation where Nick and I may come back to you guys on the podcast and be like, open and honestly, we don't love this trade. And because of the compensation you give up. Now, to me, again, I want to make
that's where the desperation comes in.
Yes.
Yes, that's where the massive amounts of desperation. But and you're right. I think the Steelers will drive this price up. And I don't want to part ways at 34. You're basically parting ways with a first round freaking pick. Now you don't get the 5th-year option on it, but there's this draft class has a lot of depth at defensive, like positions the Giants need. You can get a stud cornerback at that area. You can get another wide receiver. There's so many things you can do.
Stud D-line is what I want at 34, and you could get it.
Stud defensive lineman. And you could probably get a stud defensive lineman in round 3, possibly even day 3. It really depends. Like guys like Darius Alexander, I don't know where they're going to go. You know, the Toledo kid, because after the Senior Bowl, and he went. But like, regardless of the fact, Dan and I might.
You're on this D line. I watched a little bit of him next to
who's that? The Kentucky kid.
Oh my God! I know he plays a high pad level, but the way he moves at 340, it's Dexter Lawrence-esque in that sense of just to be able to move at that size.
He can move well. I wouldn't say it's Dexter Lawrence.
No, that's terrible. Poor man's Dexter Lawrence. No one moves like Dexter Lawrence.
He's a weirdly built guy too. He's so
very weirdly built.
Like he's got small, like I don't want to say small legs because he's still massive legs, but relative to how top heavy he is, it looked awkward watching his tape. But
maybe and I haven't seen too much of his tape yet. It's one game. Yeah. I forget who I was watching. It was either Shuck or Ward or one of the ACC or not ACC. It might have been. I don't remember who it was. It might have been Jackson. It was Jackson Dart.
Probably Jackson. Yeah.
Kentucky versus Ole Miss, and I was watching for Dart, and I was watching the end zone angle. I just kept seeing this guy flash and quickly winning, bang bang against these interior linemen. I was like, who the hell is this dude? And I looked it up, and I didn't even know much about him. This was a few weeks ago. But anyway, point being, what you said, it's a pick that you and I probably.
Deion Walker, by the way, I just wanted to get his
name. Deion Walker. Yeah. I think I said too fast, but it's probably a pick that we don't really feel like parting with. Nick and I think are fine with passing the bucket a little bit further on to 2026 if it means giving up the pick. But regardless, my point being, Joe Schoen is clearly, in my mind, geared toward trying to win now. He even mentioned, though, Nick, that if they do trade for a win now quarterback like Stafford or sign a veteran who they believe they can win now with, they are still open to drafting a quarterback at 3. Yeah. And that's something I think you and I feel maybe we're open to if they really believe in him. But we probably are more along the lines of if they trade for Stafford, we want to use that pick on Hunter or Graham or Carter or a player like that. Though I'm open to drafting a quarterback there.
I'm open to drafting Cam Ward there. I don't know if I'd be as open with Shedeur. Still need a little bit of film, as I said. Where it gets interesting is what the top 2 picks are Abdul and Hunter.
Which could be.
Which very realistically could be. Then I'm thinking, like, if you don't love Cam, do you trade down out of that?
I like it.
Because, like, I do think it's like those two are in their own echelon right now, especially when you look at it through the Giants lens, right? Unless you want to go after an offensive tackle, but even then, trading down, but it takes 2 to tango. Got that. But those two are in those are blue chip dudes, right? Is there another guy in this draft class that is like?
Some say Graham, but I think the depth of the D-line class kind of takes away from a Graham type.
That's my point. Yes, yeah, and I'm excited to get to his tape per se. Like just the Michigan defense in general. Like you look at maybe Tyler Warren, like that's a blue chip, but you're not going to spend that on a tight end. Like that's not really where the Giants are at the moment. So what is the best course of action for the Giants if they don't want the quarterback and both those 2 blue chippers are off the board? That's where I think over the next month or so, we're going to have great conversation.
Yeah, say they trade for Stafford, right? And then those 2 blue chips come off the board 1-2. And then it's interesting. At that point, again, though, I am open to the idea of drafting Ward. I understand it would mean he sits behind Stafford for 2 years, maybe even 3 years. It's a Jordan Love situation over again. But I got to say, Nick, I feel very strongly about the idea of yes, you're taking away some from the roster building and you're taking away some from Stafford's chances of winning with the Giants by not using that on a player that can help him win now. But man, it is not a bad thing to build quarterback talent out. This is a league of quarterback, D-line, and O-line. You need to do everything in your power, I think, to do it. He says he's taking a lot of swings at quarterback. He'll take as many swings. Let's see. Like that would be a good example of doing that, I think.
Like, how would Stafford feel about that too in this scenario?
Right.
If Stafford, why you draft even, or he could be, in a mature mindset where he's like, I understand my role here, kind of like what Kirk Cousins was last year with Michael Penix. Even though I don't know if Kirk really felt great about that situation. I don't really know what happened there, but it seemed to be working out for the Falcons. But the point is, that's a way you take swings at the quarterback position. If Joe Schoen wants to start taking swings and living up to the word that he just espoused a little bit ago, that's one way to do it. Now, I'm more of the mindset that really depends on how I feel about Cam Ward after I watch the tape, but I am more of the mindset of let's just make this roster as competitive as we can right now. And that third overall pick could be just a true asset to this roster building situation.
Sure, it definitely could be. A few other things regarding the third overall pick. There's a lot to talk about, so we're going to have to rapid fire through these. But Joe Schoen said the Giants have an idea of 3 to 5, maybe even 6 or 7 players they have in mind for that third overall pick. So that's just something interesting to think about. And in addition to that, he said he's open to trading up or back, Joe Schoen, which we know, but it's good. It's interesting to hear regardless of. And he said he has not had any conversations yet about trading up. Now, why I find that interesting is because the Titans GM, Nick Bergonzi, I think that Bergonzi, whatever you say.
I think it is.
Bergonzi said.
That's not Italian.
Yeah, it's an Italian. Bergonzi said that he has actually had conversations already about trading trading the number one pick. Like people have called him already. Now, Joe Schoen said he hasn't called yet. I don't know if I believe Bergonzi, to be honest, but that's what he's claiming. If you're trying to drive up the price of the first pick, that is something you would definitely tell the media. Let me make that clear. It's why I'm hesitant about believing him when he says that, because it would make sense. He also said, though, what was more interesting, I think, that he believes, like Joe Schoen, it's kind of, and we just talked about this, by the way, you and I, he wouldn't want to move past 3 or 4 is kind of what he hinted at Bergonzi if he were to trade back.
Yes. So where would he go? He would come to the New York Giants, or would somebody trade up with us and then trade like I don't know exactly how that would work. So a lot can happen. By the way, very important. Looked it up. Not an Italian, according to AI. And AI, they would never lie to us. Yeah. He doesn't really look like a Paisan, to be honest with you. Not to throw him out there like that, But I have no idea, And I love how I'm sounding more Italian now that I'm talking about it. Look how conditioned I am.
You are. I've been out of Jersey now for a week and a half, 2 weeks, and my God, I miss it from that standpoint of the people. But Mark Bergonzi said also that the Titans viewed that a very interesting thought about he wants to have as many top 100 picks in this class. That's how he's viewing the class, Bergonzi, as a class where, and we've heard this, right? It's more of a depth class than a top end class. So that's something that would interest me because the Giants, if they were put together a trade package to move from 3 to 1, it might not have to involve 34. It might involve their third round pick. And next, that's where it gets interesting though, because if he wants to collect top 100 in this draft, it might have to involve the second round pick because, he can then kind of use that pick to leverage it, trade it back, and collect more picks.
So devastating, dude. Could you imagine?
Better than up a 2026 one. That to me is off the table. I would hate to trade a 2026 one.
Yeah, I would hate that from a selfish standpoint and just in general because the Giants might suck. But just to think that, we had to part ways with the 34th overall pick and maybe like 104 or whatever it would take, maybe even 65, which would be devastating. Just because we beat the Colts. Like that's literally what it is. People are like, I don't want to. It's like, but that is. Oh, that is so.
That is it. It's why we don't want to win those games. It's why we don't believe you're a fake fan for not wanting to win those games because those games don't carry over, but the picks do. You lose the pick. That's it. Like it's simple. It's very.
Seasons are not evaluated in a vacuum. The season is continuous. Like the life of the New York Giants is continuous. So you lose those meaningless games, then that means you get a better draft pick. And the Giants, we talked about that entire week, Dan, was how the Giants secured the number 1 pick if they lose out. And then Drew Lock's like, I remember how to play football.
There are only 2 more weeks to go. There's only 2 more games at that point. We didn't have to go that much further. It's all right. It is what it is.
Here's what it is.
You can't move on, but we can't do anything about it. Joe Schoen also mentioned that the second or third round could be where he could potentially find a quarterback because they kept asking him, Ward and Sanders. He goes, I know that's the 2 names that we keep hearing thrown out, but it may not be the only 2 names in this class that they're interested in the Giants. And second or third round could be a range. I'm actually open to that, Nick. Look, historically, It hasn't been easy to find quarterbacks in rounds 2, 3 as you get further. Guess what? Historically, those top quarterback picks haven't been that great either. I think it's all a big gamble to me, and the opportunity.
Especially in this draft class, man, right? Like, I didn't mean to cut you off, but in this draft class specifically, taking your swing in the 2nd or 3rd round, that could work out. And there have been hits in it. Like Andy Dalton, that's a hit. Right. Jalen Hurts, hit. Derek Carr, hit. Like all those, like people are like, oh, but Colin Kaepernick had his run. He was a 2nd round
It's
pick.
a hit unless the guys you lose at 3rd overall, like a Sanders or Ward, are amazing. If a Sanders just becomes like a pocket passing like guy who just kind of can be great if the conditions around him are great, then it's not a miss there. You're not losing that much. It's like you could easily go back in this class, Nick. I want to make this one point, and then I'll let you go. But you could watch because I have done this. You can watch a game of Sanders on tape, straight through, chart it like I've done, and then watch a game of McCord, for example, which I've done. One game I watched so far of him, and you could look at it and be like, is there that much of a difference between getting this guy in round 3 and this guy at 3rd overall? Is it that big of a difference when you kind of project and translate?
Yeah.
That's the question you have to ask yourself, because you're not going to get Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter in round 3 in most draft classes. You can get lucky sometimes and find a talent at that level because the NFL misses sometimes. But when the NFL misses, it's not typically at those positions. It's more so at quarterback. Those are the ones that they just can't seem to figure out, and they draft, later. So it's just a big difference in opportunity cost.
Yeah, man. I remember, I think it was the 2014 draft. Derek Carr was a 2nd round pick. 1st round pick was Blake Bortles. I think he was like 4th overall, right? Like, who's had a better career, like a much better career? Derek Carr has. So it could be one of those types of situations. I mean, we've seen that, I'm sure, several times throughout history.
Plenty. I mean, sometimes you have a Hall of Famer that's rare. Breeze, Russell Wilson, those types of examples as well. It's not impossible.
That 2012 draft class, that was where I think Dalton was drafted in the 2nd round, and then Russ was drafted in the 3rd round. And then when you look at the 1st round quarterbacks, other than Cam Newton, 2011, I think is what I'm talking about. Other than, so Russ was 2012, I think, but Cam Newton. And then after that, it was like Blaine Gabbert, Christian Ponder. Yeah. So it was all these quarterbacks, Jake Locker. Yeah, they were all top 15 picks, and they all flamed out. And then you had some guys in the 2nd round. I think Kaepernick was that year, and I think Dalton was that year. And then Russ was the next year in 2012 with Andrew Luck and RG3. But regardless of the fact is, there are talented guys, and especially with the quarterback. Like, if you just find a coach and a quarterback that just click, man, they see things the same way. Like, it's a very interpersonal. Relationships are massive when it comes to the quarterback coach dynamic and how they get along and how they see the game and how they mesh together, right? But you also need those traits that you and I have talked about so many times, anticipatory throwing, toughness, being able to see the field, processing, the arm talent, all that shit.
Yeah, 100%. I want to pivot a little bit and get to a quote that's been from Joe Schoen at the presser that has been catching some, circling around medias. And he talked about, we want to figure out who these people are as people, these quarterbacks are as people. It's a unique market. Can they handle the pressure? Can they handle people talking negative about them? And he said he would never hold it against a quarterback for not throwing at the combine. He said he never downgrade a player to want to wait for his pro day, because he said the quarterbacks are not familiar with the receivers that are here at the combine, their strengths, what they like in route running, and he wouldn't want to hold it against them for not wanting to throw with receivers they're not comfortable. So 2 parts there. I want to first get to the part about not holding it against the quarterback for wanting to not throw at the combine, and what you feel about, should quarterbacks throw at the combine? Do you care at all, Nick Filato? And do you care at all that Shedeur Sanders is not going to throw at the combine?
Nah, I don't really care too much. I mean, he's going to throw at his pro day. It's annoying for the NFL, because now the NFL, if they want to get their eyes on, they need to go to the pro day as well. Like, that's probably going to piss off a lot but there's been so many quarterbacks that haven't thrown at the combine. It seems like every year people attack a quarterback for making that decision. I personally could care less about it. This episode is brought to you by Skims. Get your hands on the best underwear in the land. Look, I'm sure, gentlemen, you're a lot like me. You don't want your fit to be too compact, nor do you want to be swinging around like you're trying to destroy a piñata. You want everything in place. Comfort on a cloud with no ride-up. That is the ideal situation, and Skims provides that situation for us, gentlemen. They sent me a few pairs. I wear them to work. I wear them while I'm working out, and they are exactly what I'm looking for in my underwear. And Christmas is right around the corner. So grab a pair of Skims for someone in your life. Maybe that someone is you, and you want that comfortable underwear for your whole situation down there. So shop Skims Men's at skims.com. That's Skims.com. Let them know we sent you. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey and select our show, Big Blue Banter, in the drop-down menu that follows. And if you're looking for the perfect gifts for the whole family, Skims just launched their biggest holiday shop ever. So visit skims.com to check that out and maximize your draw's comfortability. Hey everyone, this episode is brought to you by Manscaped, the global leader in men's lifestyle and grooming. Every man knows the unbeatable feeling of a fresh barbershop shave. Now, what if I told you that you no longer have to wait weeks or even months between appointments to experience it? Introducing Manscaped's newest innovation, the Chairman Pro Electric Foil Shaver, the game-changing tool that brings the luxury of professional shave right into your home. Whether you're after that daily silky smooth finish or prefer to maintain a rugged 5 o'clock shadow, the Chairman Pro Electric Foil Shaver is your go-to for precision and style every time. Head over to manscaped.com and join the over 11 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped by using code BIGBLUE for 20% off. Gentlemen, this has changed the grooming game for me, and I highly recommend it for you. Get the Chairman Pro today and experience a shave that is as smooth as you deserve. Get 20% off plus free shipping with the code BIGBLUE at manscaped.com. That's 20% off plus free shipping with the code BIGBLUE at manscaped.com.
I don't really care either. I would say this. It would be nice if it was mandatory in my mind, because yes, I agree with what Shane's saying. Like, how could you know anything? Because they're not the receivers. They don't know. They're not comfortable with them. They don't know how they like to run certain routes. And it could look like an off-place ball, but reality is this receiver's not running the right route, the way they expect them to. Fine. But I would like the idea of every single quarterback in the class has to throw, because you get to see their arm versus the rest of the class. If you go to a quarterback's pro day, you just see his arm. You don't get to see it in comparison to the rest of the class.
But if you give them the option and they say no, you can't be like, oh, I said no, he doesn't want to compete, you know?
Agreed. The way it's set up now, I could care less. Now, the second part of that is interesting. I want to give a shout out to Giants fan in Charlotte who mentioned about that, because, Joe Schoen said it. We've heard this before. We want to figure out who they are as people. It's a unique medium market. Can they handle the pressure? Can they handle people talking negative about them? We've talked about this a lot too, Nick. And Giants fan in Charlotte made a good point. He's like, is it possible that Joe Schoen and his staff have mistakenly overweighed the influence of this and how important it is to handle the New York market versus actually being good at the position? Because he believes, or he suggested, and I'm shouting out Giants fan in Charlotte for this, that it could have led to them push them in the direction of, over the hump of should they extend Daniel Jones, or should they not, because he handled the market so well. Does it matter as much as they're giving it credit for? It's kind of like that whole baseline foundation thing we've always discussed in this. The guy's first in the door, first out the door, like Jones was. Great. That's good. We want that. You have to have it. It's a foundation, but it's not enough, and it doesn't give you wins. And I wonder if the Giants do overextend the influence of what it means to play in the market. Because guess what? Josh Allen, or all these quarterbacks who have been successful, Nick, once you set that baseline of success and you play at that certain level, you can handle any market, because the market is more gives you more leeway at that point, right? The media gives you can have a bad game or two. It's okay. So really the reality is play well, and the market matters a lot less, I think.
You're right. I would say the primary reason, and I'm sure Giants fan in Charlotte knows this, that he was extended was the 2022 season. And it's like, hey, Dable can do this with Daniel Jones, and we like Daniel Jones, and the locker room likes Daniel Jones, right. And then all those other fundamental traits that you need to be a successful quarterback, first guy in, last guy out. And I'm sure the market factored into that. That was like a side dish that factored into it, like a nice little mac and cheese that factored into the entire dish that we ended up throwing up.
Yeah. It was a bit of a chunky throw up, I would say. A few other things. This is the one that I hinted on in the headline of this video, Nick. So let's get to it. Joe Schoen had some interesting things. A little bit. He divulged a little bit. He's not a guy who likes to give any information away on specific prospects or contracts or anything like that, especially if the players aren't already on the Giants roster. But he did say about Cam Ward. He went into detail, and shout out Charlotte Carroll from The Athletic for kind of pressing him on this question. He talked about one thing he likes about Cam Ward is he says they were in a hole in that Cal game, and he was at that game, by the way. He talked about it. He saw him live at the game. And I think this is maybe a follow-up to the idea of, like, do I need to see them throw the combine or not? And he's like, he was in a hole in that Cal game, and I was at that game. And he dug them out of that game, and they won that game because of him. This is about Cam Ward. He said the Virginia Tech game as well. And by the way, Nick, I evaluated that Virginia Tech game, and I completely agree with Joe Schoen's assessment of that. He won that game for them against Virginia Tech. Not only all the plays he made to lead up to it, but in a gotta-have-it play on third down, They beat him with a blitz. And again, I've mentioned this before. Maybe it's on him. I don't know who calls protections there at Miami, but he found a way to make a play there, flipping it to the tight end, avoiding the sack that most quarterbacks are never making. It won them that football game. And he says, you bring your team back when everyone is he said, I look for if you can bring your team back when everyone in the building knows you're going to have to throw it, right? So the whole idea of like, no longer do you have the run pass option. You have every single person knows you're going to have to throw it. The defense ends can pin their ears back and just rush the passer. So just an interesting thing. He kind of went into detail there about Ward. Maybe it's a little hint that he likes Ward.
It could be a little hint that he likes Ward, or he's trying to throw people off. Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, it's something that he saw with his own two eyes. It's something that's on Ward's tape I just remember watching him on Saturday on broadcast. It's like, fourth quarter, they're down by 6. You got Cam Ward. It's like, this is a good place to be if you're Miami. Like, he was one of those quarterbacks. He was one of those quarterbacks that you could trust that would put his team in a position to be successful. And having that I don't know if that trait's innate. I'm not 100% sure, but he seemed to have that fortitude about him to be able to do that. Now, people would go back to 2022 season and say Daniel Jones did that, though, too. It's like how much you weigh that in, or like how big is this sample size? Have we seen this consistently year in and year out with Ward? I'm unsure, because in 2022, Jones did do that. Like, he did. Remember when Saquon went out in the Packers game and he led him back?
In the Packers game, but to be fair, and I want to shout out Authentic for this because I've seen this argument on Giants Twitter. Authentic broke it down, and the Packers game for sure was credit to Jones.
That's the main one.
It's almost the only one. Authentic broke it down. A lot of those comeback fourth quarter drives, and there were only a few of them. There were maybe about a handful or fewer, were Barkley driven. I think 47% of the production was Barkley.
Tennessee. Yeah.
Tennessee and among others were just Barkley running it. So it's just something to keep in mind. Like, is the quarterback actually throwing it and making the plays, or are you just kind of running it with your
I agree, but I'm positing this position to get into Joe Schoen's mindset. And Joe Schoen's mindset at that time was probably one of the reasons why they wanted to extend him was the fact that he led, and that's the way it's remembered, he led 4, 5, 6, whatever it was, fourth quarter comebacks.
Well, I want to make it clear, he made some plays. I'm not saying he didn't. It was, even though we're Barkley driven and most of the production was him in some of those comebacks, Jones still made a throw or two here. And that was a great season for him. Of course, it was the one, outlier season. And even in that, they were dead last in explosive pass plays, and the offense was figured out.
Which is crazy to think about. They were dead last in oh my gosh. Zach Wilson was a quarterback for the Jets at that time. You know what I mean? Like, that's how bad they were. That was the year Stafford got hurt, and Johnny Walford was their quarterback, or whatever the hell it was. It was rough, dude.
We found some success, I guess, of a pass game when we went to the quick game stuff, but that was easily figured out too. And it wasn't like explosive. It was just kind of throw the ball on slant flat. You know how it is. It is what it is for us here. But those days are over, Nick. And we're looking for a quarterback who can, like Joe Schoen, throw the football and take your team back when everybody knows that you have to. So I thought that was very interesting, his discussion there. Let's see what else he hit on. Oh, he did mention, these are kind of some other talking points we'll get to, but he did mention that they're looking for a right guard. He said, right guard is a spot that's open. We're evaluating if the answer is on the roster or if they will be looking outside the field. I didn't know if that meant they're evaluating if Van Roten is someone who could come back. He was arguably the Giants' most successful lineman last year, and their best lineman, Greg Van Roten. He's an older player, obviously, but he lives, he's from the area of Long Island. Or if he meant like Azudu or someone else that could potentially be Stinney, whatever it might be.
Stinney's a free agent. But I am open to bringing back both of those guys. I don't think they'll probably bring back Stinney. I am open to bring back Greg Van Roten. I don't know if I want Van Roten to be the penciled or like the inked starter, though. I would like for him to be a swing guy. He has the versatility to do so. What's going on with Evan Neal is a conversation. What's going on with Tremaine Illuminor? Are we going to put Illuminor at right tackle now that Andrew Thomas is going to be healthy? I'm knocking on wood as I say that. And the only reason I bring it up is because Shane mentioned that he's in the facility working out and he looks great. So that's a great sign for Andrew Thomas. But are we just going to have Evan Neal be the swing tackle? Or do the Giants get this idea that Evan Neal could start at right tackle because his film was moderately better last year, and then Illuminor can be the right guard to solidify the right side of the offensive line? I'm not saying that should happen, but is that even in consideration?
Yeah, Evan Neal at right guards. I mean, we've been talking about
right tackle.
Yeah, or right tackle. Hopefully right guard, I think.
Hopefully right guard.
Ready to move him to guard and give that an opportunity, a last-ditch kind of effort with Evan Neal, put him at right guard. But a couple more quick-fire things, just rapid fire, and we'll end it there. He did also mention Joe Schoen, and I'm glad you brought it up. I just think it's important to note that Andrew Thomas is no longer even in a walking boot coming off the Liz Frank. Look, we can take this for granted, but there are times where these recoveries have setbacks or they go a lot longer, and then they lead to really bad seasons for players. The fact that February 25th, he's already out of the walking boot and in the weight room is a really, really good sign. The Giants literally don't win football games when Andrew Thomas isn't on the field. He means that much to their team's success. It's like the most important player on this roster besides Lawrence, in my mind, including over Malik Neighbors. I believe he's more important to the team's success than Malik Neighbors, Andrew Thomas. And I strongly, strongly believe that. So he has to stay healthy this year. I'm glad he's ahead of schedule on that. Joe Schoen, asked if he regrets letting Saquon Barkley walk. He said no, he's happy for Barkley, and they were in different stages where they were with building a team.
He's not happy for Barkley. That's a lie. He lied to all of us.
He might be. I don't know. He also mentioned, this was funny, I thought. They asked him a reporter asked him who Joe Schoen's son.
Someone asked him that? The elite question. Who was that?
Class, because obviously, for those who don't know, who are listening to the podcast now, famously on Hard Knocks, Joe Schoen's son said, they have this scene where Joe Schoen's like, "Who do you want us to do with the 6th overall pick?" And Joe Schoen's like, Jaden Daniels, you only get one chance at this. Make the move now. Trade up for him. And Joe Schoen kind of laughs it off. It's like, yeah, we're not going to have that opportunity to take Jaden Daniels. There's no trade up scenario that could happen. And Joe Schoen said, "Who knows? He knows where that came from. That wasn't all his idea." Very kind of like. You know what I mean? Like
Joe Schoen said that?
That wasn't all his idea.
Oh, so he's basically saying, "Oh, well, it's because I put that into
right." Yeah, I mean, it's kind of lame. He's kind of like taking credit for it and making about
pompous, man. That's a pompous thing to say.
It's not a great answer from Joe Schoen, but it is confirmation that it wasn't just Brian Dable who loved Jaden Daniels. Brian Dable said, "Yeah, like snap yes," when asked if he would trade up for that quarterback. But it's clear that Joe Schoen also liked him, and I'll never know because again, I had sources that were in the building at the time, a former player who's no longer with the Giants that I played poker with, who said when he was in the building that offseason, every day they were watching Drake May tape and they were goo over Drake May. They loved him. But I don't know who they loved more, Jaden or Drake May. I think they were really in on both of those quarterbacks.
They went to both of those campuses how many times, man?
So many times. So many times for Daniels. It was unbelievable.
Now, and also the Giants ended up taking an LSU guy and Malik Neighbors.
Right.
But like, it's very possible that they were in love with the quarterback as well, and they just had to go with the wide receiver because the quarterback was no longer available. And how many times did they go to North Carolina? It seemed like a lot over the last 2 years. Joe Schoen was in North Carolina.
It was crazy. It was almost more than what Dave Gettleman did for Justin Herbert. I think it was actually more games.
And we know that Joe Schoen has a relationship with Mac Brown and North Carolina. Josh Azudu and McKethan back in 2022. Neither worked out, unfortunately.
It is what it is, but just something to consider there. He wasn't willing to give his son all the credit for like Jaden Daniels. He also said, if any other team, they asked him if any other teams asked him about the offseason Hard Knocks experience, what that was like. Obviously, it was a massive disaster for the Giants. He says, I haven't gotten any calls from other GMs, but I think I know what I would tell them. I think we know what Joe Schoen would tell them as well. And it wouldn't be, go ahead, do the offseason Hard Knocks. It's good for you.
I sometimes will be like in the shower, just doing mundane things in my life. And I'll just start like laughing, just like shaking my head in disbelief that the one time the Giants opened their doors to like the outside world, it was a complete and utter disaster for John Mara, dude.
Utter disaster for Joe Schoen as well. John Mara and Joe Schoen, really the entire organization. Part of the reason I think the locker room collapse was because of it. A strong part of the reason why the collapse was because of it.
Yeah, I mean the Daniel Jones stuff was enough as well, too, right?
Yeah, no faith. It's crazy because you're showing zero faith in him in the public in Hard Knocks at that moment, while at the same time not bringing any competition for him. It's a wild route to go there, right? Like it's crazy. How do you expect to win games like that?
I don't know if they thought they would be able to get a quarterback. And then they were like, you know what, we won't make the investment. We'll just bring in Drew Lock. And, but the guy was recovering from a torn ACL. That's like the whole thing. It's like, that was your excuse that you could have sold to Daniel Jones and Daniel Jones's camp that, yeah, man, you're ailing. We need to have insurance. We need to have an insurance policy. And instead you were just like, nope, he's good to go. Drew Lock, that's who it's going to be. And Tommy DeVito. And it's just, oh my God, so frustrating. I don't think they're going to make this. They're like, Joe Schoen has to be swinging away, man. He's going to be like, what's that movie with Joaquin Phoenix where it's just swing away? Signs. Mel Gibson movie, Signs. He's just going to be swinging away, bro. They have to sign 2 dudes or trade for Stafford or get a quarterback draft possibly. The Giants are going to take care of the quarterback position. Finally, it's way overdue. I hope they do at least.
Yeah, well, speaking of that, we'll end on this. He said, Joe Schoen said, you can't manufacture these things. You have to take a quarterback you believe in. You can't just take one to take one because everybody's saying you need to take a quarterback. Sounds good in theory. I don't buy it personally because these are some of the same sentiments that past GMs like Dave Gettleman have echoed, right? You can't just do it to do it. Or actually, he never really echoed that. He said, I want to walk off into the sunset knowing I got the Giants franchise quarterback. But in that scenario, he did take one just to take one with Daniel Jones. You can say that he was convinced on Daniel Jones, Gettleman, but he wasn't out there watching his games. He didn't really like him until he watched the Senior Bowl or was at the Senior Bowl and then went back, he said, and watched some tape after the Senior Bowl. That is a clear-cut sign of convincing yourself on a player right there. So I hope that same process doesn't happen with Joe Schoen where he convinces himself on a player that he doesn't believe in. But I will say this, he's already done extensive work on Sanders and Ward, and probably all these quarterbacks, but way more extensive on those two. He's been to a ton of games. There's been connections with Brandon Brown, the Giants assistant GM, and Shedeur Sanders. So if they were to draft either of those two, I don't think it would be an example of them convincing themselves on either. I think they already would have been convinced a long time ago. So we'll end it there. Thanks again for tuning into the Big Blue Banter podcast. Keep it locked and loaded. More content coming your way. Have a great rest of your week. Thank you to all of you who heeded my plea yesterday and liked and left comments on yesterday's video about our ideal options for the quarterback Giants in 2025. A lot of early views on that video. It took off, a lot of comments. This is how it goes. If you comment, the video has a better chance to succeed. And that's all I'll ever ask you. So please today, write a comment in. Let us know your thoughts on Joe Schoen's presser or anything else. And hit that like button. Otherwise, have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you soon.